Welcome to another episode of Writing and Reading in a DeLorean. Now, as you can tell, I'm in the car with both doors closed. That is because we have this crazy wildfires happening in Canada, and the smoke has moved down and has basically blanketed all of the East Coast, some of the Midwest. Pictures this morning from New York, the George Washington Bridge. Someone took it looking across the bridge, and half of the bridge is gone. It's just gone. I have a friend of Massachusetts who took a picture of the sun. It's June here. You shouldn't be able to look at the sun without your head exploding. We can all just look at the sun. So anyway, I'm in the car. I got the doors closed. Air quality is terrible, but I still wanted to do this video. So today I'm going to review Stephen King's sequel to The Talisman. It's called Black House. I hit my mic, sorry for that. As most of you know, Stephen King's my favorite author. He's the number one inspiration for me wanting to be an author. He doesn't necessarily inspire what I write, my actual work, but he's definitely my biggest inspiration for wanting to be a writer. And I read The Talisman a couple years after I'd gotten into him. If you have read it, then you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read it, it's one of his fantasy novels. Airs more on the side of fantasy than it does horror or anything else. It's a loose puzzle piece to the Dark Tower saga. It's not part of the Dark Tower series, numbering wise, but it can be read on its own, but it's within the universe of the Dark Tower. Steven Spielberg has at one point bought the rights to make the movie, and it's been in developmental hell for years. Point being is that he 2001, I believe, is when this came out. He decided to write a sequel, a couple decades after he wrote the first one. And so I read this just now, finally. It's been out for 22 years, whatever. A long time has gone by since I read the first one. I was afraid that I would need to read the first one again and continue on, but I didn't feel like reading the first one again. It's not that I didn't like it, not that I don't, wouldn't read a book again, but it's a really large book, and I felt like I just didn't want to read it just to maybe understand a couple parts of this. But I'm going to say something. It is a completely different tone than The Talisman, where The Talisman was more action-y, kind of felt like a Goonies meets Neverending Story. This Black House was definitely ramped up with the grittiness and descriptions and the gore almost. It felt more along the lines of something like an American Horror Story. There's a fox running by my car right now. That is pretty cool. It's literally a fox, just out in daylight. I would turn it around and show you guys, but sorry in the interruption, but I've just very rarely just seen a fox in the middle of the day. I wonder if it's the smoke. All right, back on track. But the main character, Jack, he's an adult now. He's a kid in The Talisman. He was on a quest to save his mother, who was dying, and you flip into the other land, and you have a doppelganger there, and who's like a different person than you are here. In this one, there is a serial killer called the Fisherman, and he's kidnapping and killing little kids, very much like Pennywise does in It. But it's this old guy. I don't want to give you too many spoilers, because this is more of a review than a description. But it's an old guy who's being controlled by a force that belongs in the other world. And I just felt my review, short and sweet, is that the Black House impressed me because he took the series, or being a sequel, into a much darker realm, and so I enjoyed that. I didn't enjoy the first, 60% of the book. No, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. I kept going, when is this going to get good? When is this going to get better? There's so much setup. There's so much exposition. Lots of characters, new characters that weren't even in the first one. We kind of had to learn about. And it's a pretty large book. It's 600, maybe 600 something pages. And it's, I felt it was slow even slower for Stephen King, and I know some of people's complaints with his books is that they do take a long time to get into the nitty-gritty. That's something I like about him, because when it does happen, it feels natural. You don't feel like on page 3 there's all of a sudden all these suspension of disbeliefs I have to worry about. But I felt that this one just took a little too long, especially being a sequel. I think with sequels, the avenue or the pathway has supposed to be set up. So sequels are supposed to just like get in, just like boom. One thing I did with Moonlight City Drive, my trilogy, part 2 and part 3, I start page 1. I expect that the, reader doesn't want me to set up all these new characters. I mean, we're in it to win it. So I was kind of disappointed in that, but I do have to say that when the Black House took the turn and shit started to get real, it was like classic King. It was just like everything that I love about his earlier novels, stuff that he built his career on. So I'm kind of torn. If someone was asking me, how many stars would I give it? It'd be like, well, what part of the book are we talking about? It's kind of like music. I have some albums where, the first, let's say it was a cassette or a vinyl, and you had a side 1 and a side 2. I have some albums that I own that, man, side 1 is just not a single skip song. It's just the greatest thing in the world. And then side 2, you're like, oh God, there's like one good song. But when I listen to the album, I don't want to skip any songs, so I still kind of go through them all. I'm sure you know some albums where you're like, man, the first half is so much better than the second, or the second half is so much better than the first. I kind of felt like this with this book. There was a definitive moment where you're like, okay, like, this is so awesome. And so I'm not going to give any stars, because I feel it's a schizophrenic novel where it's just, but I don't necessarily think if I read it immediately after The Talisman, it would have added or subtracted my opinion. I was kind of thinking as I was reading it, well, what if I did read The Talisman and go right into this, page end to page start, like it was one big book. And the tone is so different that I don't think that matters. I think if you ever read The Talisman and you read it years and years and years ago, you could pick up Black House and enjoy it, and it would stand on its own, even though it's technically a sequel to The Talisman. But that is my review. I hope the fox likes it. I hope this smoke dies down. It's killing everybody's asthma. Everybody's wearing masks again. It's like it's COVID. I left, I did some errands today. I was like, why is everyone wearing masks? Is there like a new pandemic I wasn't told about? Because everyone's wearing masks here. But that's because nobody can breathe. It's hopefully filtering the smoke. But so they have it. Reading and writing in a DeLorean with the doors closed. Unusual, I know. We'll see what's going to happen next time. On the next video, catch you on the flip side.